I saw the smirk on my son's face as the needle went in. He thought the dementia made me blind to his cruelty. He didn't know I'd already swapped the vials in his bag. I wasn't losing my mind. I was waking up. Please subscribe to the Silver Justice channel. Let's show the world that we aren't victims, we're survivors. The fog was the worst part. It wasn't a natural tiredness, like the kind you get after pulling a transmission or sanding down a fender for 6 hours. No, this was a heavy, chemical grayness that sat behind my eyes and made the world tilt sideways. I gripped the armrests of my recliner, the leather worn soft and smooth from 40 years of use. My son, David, snapped his medical kit shut. The sound echoed in the quiet living room like a gunshot. "There we go, Mom," he said, his voice dripping with that sickly sweet tone he'd adopted 6 months ago. It was the voice you used for a toddler or a golden retriever you were about to put down. "That should help with the agitation. You've been so worked up lately about the shop. Dr. Evans says we need to keep your blood pressure steady." "I ain't agitated, David," I said, though the words felt thick in my mouth. My tongue felt like it was 2 sizes too big. "I'm just pissed off. There's a difference." David sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He wore a suit that cost more than my first 3 cars combined, but he still looked cheap, shifty. He walked over to the mantel and straightened a picture of his father, my Frank. Frank would have hated that suit. Frank was a grease under the fingernails, honest day's work kind of man. David was a numbers guy, a hedge fund manager who hadn't touched a wrench since he was 12. "Mom, please, we've been over this," David said, turning back to me with a practiced look of concern. "The developers called again. The offer for Higgins Customs is expiring on Friday. It's generous, insanely generous. You can't keep running a restoration shop at 72. It's dangerous. You're forgetting things. Last week you left the compressor running all night." "I didn't leave it running," I muttered, fighting the wave of drowsiness crashing over me. "The timer was busted. I told you I fixed it." "See, this is what I mean, paranoia," he said, pulling out his phone. He typed something quickly. "Karen and I just want you safe. We found that lovely facility in Cedar Hills. Assisted living, Mom, not a nursing home. It's like a resort. They have bingo, water aerobics." "I don't want to play bingo with a bunch of blue hairs," I snapped, forcing my eyes to stay open. "I want to finish the 69 Camaro in Bay 3. The client is expecting it." "The client has been refunded, Mom. I handled it." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You did what?" "I refunded the deposit. I told him you were retiring due to health issues. It's done." I tried to stand up, but my knees buckled. I slumped back into the chair, helpless. The room spun. "Get out," I whispered. "He'll be back in the morning with the paperwork," David said, ignoring my rage. He picked up his bag. "Rest now. Let the medicine do its work. It's for the best." He locked the front door from the outside. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I was a prisoner in the house Frank built with his own 2 hands. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of afternoon sunlight. The medicine was supposed to knock me out, make me pliable, confuse my memory, so that when the lawyers came, I'd sign anything just to make the confusion stop. That's what they'd been doing for months, gaslighting me, making me think I was losing my marbles. But I wasn't the only mechanic in the family. A low rumble from the driveway cut through the silence. I knew that sound anywhere. A custom exhaust on a V8, a 1970 Chevelle SS. Riley, my granddaughter, David's daughter, though he barely claimed her since she dropped out of business school to open her own garage in Portland. She was the black sheep, the disappointment. To me, she was the only one who had Frank's spirit. The back door, the one with the sticky lock that you had to jiggle just right, creaked open. "Gram," she said, her voice sharp, low. "In the den, honey," I croaked. Riley appeared in the doorway. She looked like she'd come straight from work. Coveralls tied at the waist, a tank top stained with oil, her arms covered in tattoos that David absolutely loathed. She took one look at me and rushed over, dropping her helmet on the floor. "Whoa, hey, look at me," she said, crouching down. Her eyes were terrified. "You look pale as a ghost. Did Dad just leave? I saw his BMW pulling out of the subdivision." He gave me the shot for the blood pressure and the anxiety. Riley grabbed my wrist, checking my pulse. She frowned. "Gram, your pulse is tanking. This isn't anxiety meds. Where's the vial? Did he leave it?" "Trash." I pointed a shaky finger toward the kitchen. He threw the empty wrapper in the trash. Riley sprinted to the kitchen. I heard the bin lid clang. She came back a moment later holding a small crumpled foil wrapper and a glass vial. She held it up to the light, squinting at the label. "Hydroxyzine? No, that's just an antihistamine. That wouldn't do this," she muttered. Then she looked closer at the tiny print on the vial itself, not the box. Her face went white. "Holy, Gram, this is heavy-duty antipsychotic mixed with a sedative. And the dosage, this is enough to drop a horse. He's not treating your blood pressure, he's chemically lobbying you." "Lobotomizing," I corrected, a small smile touching my lips despite the dizziness. I knew it. I knew I wasn't crazy. "You're not crazy," Riley said fiercely. She pulled out a bottle of water from her bag and made me drink. "He's drugging you so you can't fight the sale. I did some digging, Gram. I have friends at the county clerk's office. The developers aren't just buying the shop, they're buying the whole block. They want to put up luxury condos, but they can't break ground until they have your deed. The deal is worth $4 million. David said, $1 million? Of course he did. He's pocketing the rest. He's in debt, big time. Gambling debts, bad investments. He's drowning, and you're his life raft." She paced the room, her heavy boots thudding on the hardwood. Rage is a funny thing. It can burn through the strongest sedative if you let it. I thought about Frank. I thought about the year 1978, when we slept in the back of the garage because we couldn't afford rent, just so we could buy our first lift. I thought about the thousands of cars we'd fixed, the community we'd built. And I thought about my son, my flesh and blood, sticking a needle in my arm to steal it all. I sat up straight. The room spun, but I gritted my teeth and forced it to stop. "I ain't going to no ward, Riley." "Damn straight you aren't. But we can't stay here. He's coming back in the morning with a notary and probably a doctor on his payroll. We need to ghost, right now. I can't just leave the house, Riley. It's everything. It's a building, Gram. You are the legacy. And if we stay, he wins. We need to go somewhere he can't find us. Let this stuff clear out of your system so you can pass a talk screen, and then we lawyer up. Real lawyers, not Dad's golf buddies." She was right. I knew she was right. But 40 years? "Pack a bag," Riley said, echoing the urgency in my own heart. "Essentials only. Meds, the real ones. Cash, IDs. Leave your phone, he's probably tracking it." I stood up, leaning heavily on the table. "Help me upstairs." 20 minutes later, I was shoving clothes into an old duffel bag. My hands were shaking, but not from the drugs anymore. Adrenaline was a powerful thing. I grabbed the photo of Frank from the nightstand, tucked my jewelry roll into my coat pocket, and then I went to the bottom drawer of my dresser. I pulled out the false bottom. There, sitting in a velvet pouch, was the spare key to the shop's safe and a heavy leather-bound ledger. The real books, the ones that showed exactly how profitable the shop still was, contrary to the cooked numbers David had been showing the bank. "Got it?" Riley asked from the doorway. She had raided the kitchen for non-perishables. "Yeah." I looked around the bedroom. The quilt I'd made, the curtains Frank had hung. "Let's roll." We went out the back way. The rain had started, a cold Oregon drizzle that soaked into your bones. I climbed into the passenger seat of Riley's Chevelle. The smell of old leather and high-octane gas was better than any perfume. It smelled like freedom. Riley fired up the engine. The V8 roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that shook the window glass. She didn't turn on the headlights yet. We rolled down the driveway in the dark, creeping past the neighbors' houses. When we turned onto the main road, I looked back. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down, tinted windows, engine running. "Riley," I said, my voice tight. "Don't look now, but we got a tail." Riley glanced in the rearview mirror. "I see him. Dad hired private security, probably to make sure you didn't wander off before the notary arrives. Can you lose him?" Riley shifted gears, her hand gripping the stick shift with white-knuckled intensity. A grin spread across her face, a dangerous, sharp grin that reminded me so much of myself at 22. "Riley," she said, revving the engine until it screamed.
My heart was hammering like a piston in a cylinder that's lost its oil. I watched the speedometer needle climb past 90, the rain blurring the streetlights into long, angry streaks of neon. The guy tailing us thought he was hunting a confused old lady, but he was chasing 2 generations of petrol heads in a car built to outrun the devil himself. If you want to see how we turn the tables on the people trying to erase us, hit that subscribe button for the Silver Justice channel. We're just getting warmed up. "He's closing the gap, Graham!" Riley shouted, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The Chevelle's rear end fishtailed slightly as we hit a patch of standing water, but she corrected it with a flick of her wrist that would have made Frank proud. "He's in a Taurus, honey," I grit out, gripping the dash. "Front-wheel drive. He's got traction control, but he's got no soul. Take the next left, the one by the old textile factory. Sharp turn. That's a dead end." "Not anymore. The city tore down the fence last week. Trust me." Riley didn't hesitate. That's what I loved about her. She downshifted, the engine screaming in protest, revs flaring. We hit the corner hard. The heavy steel body of the Chevelle leaned, the tires finding grip where there shouldn't have been any. We slid sideways, a controlled drift, and shot into the alleyway between the crumbling brick buildings. I looked back. The black sedan tried to follow. He came in too hot, braked too late, his ABS chattered, locking up his wheels on the wet pavement. He understeered right past the turn, slamming his bumper into a dumpster with a satisfying crunch of plastic and metal. "Ha!" I barked a laugh, though it turned into a cough that rattled my chest. Amateur. "We're not clear yet," Riley said, her eyes scanning the dark industrial park. She navigated the maze of loading docks and rusted shipping containers, killing the headlights. We rolled in darkness, guided only by the ambient city glow reflecting off the wet asphalt. The V8 rumbled low, a predator stalking through the night. My adrenaline was starting to crash. The drugs David had pumped into me were fighting back against the fear. My eyelids felt like lead weights. "Where are we going?" I slurred slightly, hating the weakness in my voice. "My spot," Riley said softly. "It's off the grid. Dad doesn't know about it." We drove for another 20 minutes, weaving through the back streets of the industrial district until we reached a nondescript corrugated metal warehouse near the river. Riley hopped out, unlocked a heavy padlock, and rolled up the bay door. She drove us inside and pulled the chain to drop the door before killing the engine. Silence rushed back in, ringing in my ears. The smell of the place hit me instantly. Sawdust, welding fumes, and degreaser. It smelled like home. Riley helped me out of the car. My legs felt like rubber bands. She guided me to a battered leather couch in the corner of the shop. "Sit," she ordered, pulling a thick wool blanket from a shelf and draping it over me. "I'm going to make coffee. Strong. You need to flush that poison out." I looked around while she busied herself with a hot plate and a kettle. The shop was small, but immaculate. A lift in the center, a pristine snap-on tool chest, and half a motorcycle disassembled on a workbench. It wasn't a hobby shop.
It was a professional operation. You built this? I asked, my voice trembling. Yeah, Riley called out. Saved every dime from the side jobs you threw my way. Dad thinks I'm waiting tables at a dive bar. He'd flip if he knew I was restoring vintage Indians and triumphs. She handed me a steaming mug, black. It tasted like battery acid and salvation. I took a long sip, feeling the heat spread through my chest. David, I started, then stopped. It hurt to say his name. He's got the power of attorney paperwork ready, Riley. If he reports me missing, he won't call the cops. Not yet. If he calls the cops, he has to explain why his mother ran away in the middle of the night. It draws attention. He wants to keep this quiet. He'll use his private security goons to find us first. He's desperate, I said, clutching the mug. You said gambling? Riley nodded grimly. She pulled out her phone. I did a credit dive on him last week. Don't ask me how. Dad is leveraged to the hilt. He owes sharks, Gram, not the bank, the kind of people who break legs. He borrowed against his own house, maxed out the cards, and I think he dipped into my college fund years ago. That's why he was so relieved when I dropped out. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the damp garage air settled on me. He needs the sale of the shop to pay them off? Exactly. $4 million covers his debt and leaves him with a nice cushion to keep playing the big shot. But without your signature on that deed, he's a dead man walking. And he's willing to sacrifice you to save his own skin. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I angrily wiped it away. I changed his diapers. I paid for his fancy business school. I gave him the down payment on his first house. He's not the guy you raised, Gram. Whatever got hold of him, greed, fear, it ate him up a long time ago. Riley reached out and took my hand. Her palm was rough, calloused, a worker's hand. But we have the ledger. What's in it? I pointed to the duffel bag. Open it. She unzipped the bag and pulled out the heavy leather-bound book. She flipped it open to the bookmark I had left. Her eyes scanned the columns of neat, handwritten figures. This is the real income, she whispered. Dad's been showing the bank P&L statements that show the shop losing money for 5 years straight. He's been cooking the books to devalue the business so the developers could lowball the offer. Look at the vendor payments, I pointed. Apex Consulting, Riverfront Logistics. She read the names. Who are they? They don't exist, I said, my voice hardening. I checked. He's been funneling cash out of the shop accounts into these shell companies for 2 years. He was stealing from me while he was telling me I was going senile because the accounts didn't balance. That son of a... She cut herself off. She stood up and started pacing again. Okay, this proves fraud. Embezzlement. If we take this to the DA, he goes to prison. And the shop gets tied up in evidence for years. The developers will pull out. The city might condemn the property if it sits empty. We lose the legacy. So what do? We can't go back. We need leverage, I said. We need to make him back down. We need to expose him to the people he's terrified of. Suddenly, Riley's phone buzzed. A harsh, vibrating sound on the metal workbench. She froze. I thought you said he couldn't track us, I said. He can't. I pulled the battery out of your phone and left mine in a Faraday bag until just now. She picked it up gingerly. It's a news alert. Her face went slack. She turned the screen toward me. It was a local news feed. A breaking news banner ran across the bottom. Silver alert. Martha Higgins, 72, suffering from advanced dementia, believed to be abducted by a estranged relative. Suspect is armed and dangerous. Below the headline was a picture of Riley, a mugshot from when she got arrested for drag racing 3 years ago. She looked wild, angry. And next to it, a photo of me from my 70th birthday, looking frail because I had the flu that week. "He went nuclear," Riley whispered. "He called the cops. He spun the narrative. Now if we go to the police, I'm the kidnapper and you're the confused victim who doesn't know what she's saying." I stared at the screen. David had played his ace. He was betting everything on the fact that no one would believe a demented old woman and a criminal granddaughter over a respected financial advisor. He thought we had cornered. He thought we were scared. But looking at that photo of Riley and then looking at the young woman standing in front of me, strong, capable, and furious, I realized something. David forgot the most important rule of mechanics. Pressure builds. If you don't vent it, it explodes. "Okay," I said, standing up. My legs were steadier now. The anger was a better fuel than coffee. "He put a target on your back. So we can't hide anymore. We have to go on the offensive. He's trying to sell the shop on Friday, right?" "Yeah, the closing meeting is at his office downtown at noon." "Then we need to be there, but not to sign." "Graham, if we walk in there, the cops will tackle me before I get 3 feet inside the door." "Not if we have insurance," I said. I walked over to the workbench and picked up a wrench, weighing it in my hand. It felt good, heavy, real. He's got the law, we've got the truth, and we've got friends he doesn't know about. Remember Big Mike?
They say you can't go home again, especially when your own son has turned that home into a fortress and put a bounty on your head. But I wasn't going there to reminisce. I was going there to steal back my life. Before we hotwire this minivan and break into a crime scene, smash that subscribe button for the Silver Justice channel. We're taking back what's ours, one gear at a time. The rain hadn't let up. It was coming down in sheets, turning the dirt lot of Big Mike's Auto Salvage into a swamp. Riley killed the lights of the Chevelle as we rolled up to the chain-link gate. The "Beware of Dog" sign was rusted, but I knew the Rottweilers behind it were brand new. "Mike's gonna shoot us," Riley said, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. "He's got a twitchy trigger finger, Graham." "Mike owes me," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "I fixed his transmission in '98 when nobody else could figure out the linkage. He remembers." I stepped out into the mud. The dog started barking instantly, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in my chest. A floodlight snapped on from the trailer office, blinding me. Then came the unmistakable clack-clack of a pump-action shotgun. "Who's trespassing?" a gravelly voice boomed over the rain. "Put it down, Mike," I shouted, shielding my eyes. "Unless you want to explain to your mother why you shot Martha Higgins." There was a pause. The shotgun lowered. "Martha? That you? You're supposed to be... Well, the news said you were lost." "I ain't lost, Mike. I'm just on a detour." Big Mike waddled out to the gate. He was a mountain of a man, grease permanently etched into his skin, wearing a stained tank top despite the cold. He unlocked the padlock and swung the gate open. "Get that heat score off the street," he grunted, nodding at the Chevelle. "Your boy David has them rattled." We pulled the Chevelle into the back of his crusher shed, hiding it behind a stack of crushed compacts. It hurt to leave it there, sitting in the damp, but we needed camouflage. "We need a loaner, Mike," I said as we walked into his cluttered office. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and wet dog. Mike scratched his beard. "He's got a 2010 Odyssey, champagne color, dented fender. Engine runs smooth, though. It's got 200K on the clock, but it's invisible. Soccer mom special." "Perfect," Riley said. "David's got a reward out," Mike said, leaning against his desk. He looked at me, his eyes serious. 10 grand for info leading to your safe return. That's a lot of scratch." "You want the money, Mike?" I asked, holding his gaze. He spat into a cup. "David tried to lowball me on a towing contract 3 years ago, called my yard an eyesore. I'd pay 10 grand just to watch you kick his teeth in. Keys are in the ignition. Get out of here."
10 minutes later, we were cruising down the interstate in a minivan that smelled like old Cheerios and milk. It was a far cry from the Chevelle, but nobody looked twice at us. "Okay," Riley said, her laptop open on her lap, the screen glowing blue in the dark cab. "I'm tapping into the house network. Dad kept the Wi-Fi password as your birthday, idiot." He never did have much imagination, I muttered, driving with both hands on the wheel. The minivan handled like a boat, wallowing in the turns. "He's got smart cameras set up," Riley said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Front door, back door, driveway. But the system is glitchy. If I loop the feed, I can bias maybe 5 minutes before the timestamp jumps and he notices." 5 minutes is tight," I said. "Where is he?" "Phone GPS puts him at the house," Riley said, her voice dropping. "He's staying there, probably guarding the fort." My stomach tightened. Going into an empty house was one thing. Going in while David was sleeping upstairs was a whole different level of risk. But the drugs, the evidence that proved he was sedating me, were inside. "We do it," I said. "He sleeps like the dead, always has. Remember how he slept through that earthquake in 2009? Graham, that was a 3.0 magnitude. This is a felony B&E. It's not breaking and entering if it's my name on the deed," I snapped. "We park a block over. We go in through the coal chute." Riley looked at me. "The coal chute? That thing hasn't been opened since the Carter administration. It's welded shut." I corrected. "It's welded. It was welded shut. Frank welded it, which means there's a trick to it, a pressure latch on the inside frame. He showed me once in case of a fire. David doesn't know about it." We parked the Odyssey on a side street under the heavy canopy of an oak tree. The neighborhood was quiet, the rain muffling any sound. We pulled on dark hoodies. Riley grabbed her backpack and I grabbed a heavy flashlight. Creeping through the neighbor's hedge felt surreal. I'd pruned these azaleas myself. Now I was using them for cover. We reached the side of my house. The brick felt cold and rough under my hand. "Cameras are looped," Riley whispered, checking her phone. "We're ghosts. Go!" I knelt by the old iron door of the coal chute, hidden behind the AC unit. It was rusted and covered in ivy. I felt along the rim, my fingers searching for the small indentation Frank had made. There. I pressed hard with my thumb, feeling the arthritis flare, and twisted. Click. The latch gave way. The door groaned softly as I pulled it open. A puff of stale earthen air hit my face. "You first," I whispered. "It's a drop." She slid in feet first, disappearing into the darkness of the basement. I followed, my joints protesting as I shimmied through the narrow opening and dropped onto the pile of old coal dust below. We were in. The basement was silent. The furnace hummed periodically, a familiar heartbeat. We crept up the wooden stairs, skipping the third step that always squeaked. Frank had meant to fix that for years. I was glad he hadn't. At the top of the stairs, I cracked the door. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the microwave clock, 2:14 a.m. "Where's the stash?" Riley breathed in my ear. "The study," I mouthed. "He keeps his medical bag in the bottom drawer of the roll-top desk. He thinks I know where the key is." We moved through the living room like shadows. The floorboards felt different under my sneakers, almost hostile. We reached the study. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room smelled of David's expensive cologne, masking the scent of Frank's old pipe tobacco. The desk was a mess of papers. Blueprints. Riley moved to the desk, illuminating it with her phone. "Graham, look at this." I squinted at the papers. It wasn't just the shop. It was the house. The blueprint showed the whole lot leveled. My garden, Frank's workshop, the maple tree, all replaced by a 4-story condo complex called the Higgins Lofts. "He's selling the name too," I whispered, disgust rising like bile. "He's erasing us and branding the rubble." "Focus," Riley hissed. "The drawer." I reached under the lip of the desk, feeling for the magnetic key Frank had hidden there 40 years ago. It was gone. Damn it, I cursed silently. He found it. Step back, Riley whispered. She pulled a tension wrench and a pick from her pocket. She didn't spend 3 years dating a locksmith for nothing. She worked the lock, scritch, scratch, click. The drawer popped open. Inside, sitting innocently on a leather pad, was the black medical bag. Riley unzipped it. Rows of vials glinted in the flashlight beam. Haloperidol, lorazepam, and a notebook. I grabbed the notebook. It was David's handwriting. Dates, times, dosages, and notes. Subject agitated, increased dose. 11:24. Lawyer meeting scheduled. Administer booster 1 hour prior. He kept a log. I stared at the page, my hands shaking. He documented my poisoning like he was tuning an engine. Got it, Riley said, shoving the vials in the notebook into her backpack. We have the smoking gun. Let's go. Suddenly, the floorboards above us creaked. We froze. Heavy footsteps moved across the ceiling. Then, the sound of a toilet flushing. He was awake. We need to move, Riley whispered, her eyes wide. We turned to leave, but the light in the hallway snapped on. A beam of yellow light sliced into the study. Hello? David's voice called out from the stairs. He sounded groggy, confused. Is someone there? He was coming down. Window, I pointed to the sash window behind the desk. Go! Riley scrambled to the window, unlocking the latch. It was painted shut. She shoved against it, grunting with effort. It wouldn't budge. Damn it, she hissed. The footsteps were in the hall now, getting closer. Hide, I whispered, pushing her behind the heavy velvet curtains. I ducked down behind the big leather armchair in the corner. David walked into the room. He was wearing silk pajamas, looking soft and ridiculous. He rubbed his eyes, scanning the room. Hello, he muttered. He walked to the desk. He paused. He saw the open drawer. The silence that followed was electric. I could hear him breathing. He reached out and touched the empty space where the bag had been. Riley, he whispered, his voice turning cold. He didn't sound like a son anymore. He sounded like a wolf who realized his trap had been sprung. He pulled his phone from his pocket. Security? Yeah, I think we have intruders. Seal the perimeter now. He turned and walked out.
My hands were still trembling. Not from the Parkinson's David tried to convince the doctors I had, but from the adrenaline crash. The mud from my own backyard was drying on my jeans, itching like crazy. We were sitting in the parking lot of Golden Horizon Senior Living, the engine of the beat-up Odyssey ticking as it cooled down. Before we bust an inmate out of this high-end prison, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button for the Silver Justice channel. If they think we're too old to fight back, they've got another thing coming. Graham, it's 3:30 in the morning, Riley whispered, staring up at the monolithic brick building. This place is locked down tighter than the Pentagon. How are we getting in? It's an assisted living facility, Riley, not Alcatraz. And they shift staff at 3:45. The night crew is tired and the morning crew is late and coffee deprived. It's the gap. Frank used to call it the mechanic's minute, that moment when the bolt is loose but not off. I opened the door and slid out. My knees popped, loud enough to make me wince. Grab the ledger on the laptop. Leave the medical bag under the seat. We don't need drugs for this. We need math. We walked around the side of the building to the service entrance near the kitchen. I knew this spot. I'd visited my friend Agnes here every Tuesday until she passed last winter. I knew that the kitchen staff propped the heavy steel door open with a brick so they could sneak smoke breaks without triggering the alarm. Sure enough, a thin wisp of cigarette smoke curled into the rainy night air. A young guy in a hairnet was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling on his phone. Act like you belong, I muttered to Riley. I walked right up to him. He looked up, startled, dropping his cigarette. You're late with the delivery, I snapped, channeling every ounce of authority I had left. Mr. Jenkins in 304 has been waiting for his specialized nutritional supplements for an hour. Do you want to be the one to tell the director why the residents are missing their meds? The kid blinked, looking at my muddy clothes, then at Riley's determined face. He didn't see a fugitive grandmother. He saw a problem he didn't get paid enough to solve. Sorry, ma'am. I just
The door's open." "I know it is," I said, breezing past him into the warm, disinfectant-smelling hallway. Riley followed, tucking her head down. We navigated the silent corridors. It smelled like lavender cleaning fluid and old soup. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, room 304. I didn't knock. I tried the handle, unlocked, and pushed it open. The room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of 3 computer monitors set up on a desk that had been modified to fit over a hospital bed. The clicking of a mechanical keyboard stopped as we entered. "I told the nurse if she tries to check my vitals one more time before dawn, I'm suing for harassment," a raspy voice croaked from the shadows. "It's not the nurse, Arthur," I said softly. Arthur, Old Man Jenkins, spun his wheelchair around. He was 91, bald as a tire, with thick glasses that magnified his eyes to owl-like proportions. He was wearing a faded Metallica t-shirt and pajama bottoms. "Martha?" He squinted, rolling closer. "You look like hell. I heard you were demented. The news said you were wandering the highway looking for your cat." "I don't have a cat, and I'm not demented. I'm pissed off." Arthur grinned, revealing a set of expensive implants. "Best way to be. Who's the muscle?" "My granddaughter, Riley. We need your brain, Arthur. You're still doing forensic audits for fun?" "Beats bingo," he grunted. "What do you got?" Riley cleared off a stack of Wall Street journals from the spare chair and set the laptop down. I pulled the heavy leather ledger from the backpack and slammed it on his desk next to his monitors. "David is cooking the books," I said. "He's trying to sell the shop to cover his debts, but the numbers don't add up. He's showing losses where there should be profit, but he's also moving cash into companies I've never heard of." Arthur's eyes lit up. He rubbed his hands together like he was about to carve a turkey. "Fraud? Embezzlement? Finally, something interesting. Hook up the laptop, kid." For the next hour, the only sounds in the room were the hum of the hard drive and Arthur's muttering. He scanned the pages of the ledger, comparing them to the digital files Riley had pulled from David's home server. His fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up public records, shell company registrations, and tax filings. "He's sloppy," he mumbled, tapping the screen. "Arrogant. He thinks because he uses an LLC in Delaware, nobody can trace the beneficial owner. Amateur hour." "What is it?" Riley asked, leaning over his shoulder. Arthur spun the monitor around. "Okay, look here. See these payments to Apex Consulting? 10 grand a month, regular as clockwork. And these outflows to Riverfront Logistics? They match perfectly with the dates of your inventory purchases, but the amounts are inflated by 200%. "He's overpaying for parts?" I asked. "No, he's buying parts at cost, invoicing the shop for triple, and sending the difference to Riverfront. He's skimming. But that's the small potatoes." Arthur pointed a bony finger at a complex graph on the screen. "This is the big one. Riverfront Logistics isn't a logistics company. It's a holding company owned by a trust. And guess who sits on the board of the trust?" "David?" I guessed. "No, a guy named Marcus the Vice Vane." Riley sucked in a breath. "Vane? The loan shark? The guy who runs the underground poker games in the warehouse district?" "The very same," Arthur said grimly. "Your son isn't just in debt to sharks, Martha. He's washing money for them. He's using your shop's legitimate cash flow to clean their dirty money. He pumps the dirty cash in as anonymous service fees or cash sales and pays it out to the shell company as consulting fees. It looks like business expenses to the IRS, but it's actually laundering." I felt the blood drain from my face. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "He's working for the mob?" I said. "He's owned by the mob," Arthur corrected. "And if he doesn't sell that land on Friday, he can't pay the exit fee he likely negotiated to get out. He's trying to sell the shop to pay off Vane and run." $4 million, Riley whispered. "That covers the debt and buys him a new life." "And if he doesn't get it?" I asked. Arthur drew a finger across his throat. "Vane doesn't do payment plans." The room went silent. The rain tapped against the window pane. My son was a monster. Yes, he had drugged me, gaslighted me, and tried to steal my legacy. But he was also in over his head with people who would kill him without a second thought. "We have him," Riley said, her voice hard. "This is a RICO case. If we give this to the feds, David goes away for 20 years. Vane goes down too. If you go to the feds," Arthur warned, "David gets arrested, the assets get frozen, and your shop becomes a crime scene for the next 5 years. You'll never turn a wrench in there again." and Vane's friends on the outside might decide to pay you a visit for snitching. I don't want the feds, I said, standing up. The fatigue was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I want my shop, and I want David to admit what he did to me. So what's the play? Arthur asked, looking at me with respect. The closing meeting is at noon today, I said, checking the clock. It was almost 5 a.m. David, the developers, and the lawyers will be at Apex Tower. You can't just walk in, Riley said. David has your photo at the security desk. Silver alert. Remember? They'll detain you in the lobby. We're not walking in as Martha Higgins, I said, a plan forming in my mind. A plan Frank would have called high risk, high reward. Arthur, can you print these documents? All of them. The laundering trail, the fake invoices, the connection to Vane. I have a laser printer right here, Arthur patted the machine. I'll make you a dossier that would make a prosecutor drool. Good. Riley, we need to go shopping. Shopping? Nothing is open. The 24-hour Walmart is, I said. We need hair dye, we need uniforms, and we need to stop by the shop, the warehouse, to get the Chevelle back. The Chevelle? I thought we were keeping a low profile. The low profile part is over, I said, smoothing down my dirty shirt. We needed to be invisible to find the truth. Now that we have it, we need to be loud. We need to scare him. And nothing scares David more than realizing he's not the smartest guy in the room. I turned to Arthur. Thank you, Arthur. You just saved my life. Go give him hell, Martha, he grinned, firing up the printer. And if you get the chance, kick him in the shins for me. We slipped out of the retirement home just as the sky was starting to turn a bruised purple in the east. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and fresh. As we got back into the minivan, Riley looked at me. So what's the disguise? Janitors? Catering staff? No, I said, watching the first light of dawn hit the wet pavement. David is a snob. He ignores the help, but he's terrified of authority. We're going to walk in there looking like the one thing that can destroy his entire world. And what's that? Auditors, I smiled. We're going to walk in there and audit his life. But first, I had to do something about my hair. I looked in the vanity mirror. The gray roots were showing, my face was pale. Riley, does that Walmart sell the midnight black dye? Yeah, why? Because Martha the victim is gray, but the woman who's going to take down David Higgins, she wears black. We had 6 hours until the meeting, 6 hours to transform from fugitives into the executioners of my son's career. The Odyssey groaned as I floored it. We had work to do. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour Walmart bathroom were unforgiving. They buzzed with a low hum that sounded like a dying transformer. I looked in the mirror, and the woman staring back at me was a stranger. Her hair was wet, slicked back, and dark as a quart of used motor oil. Midnight onyx, the box had promised. It delivered. The gray was gone. The fragile, confused old lady David had painted me as, she was gone too. You look intense, Graham, said Riley, leaning against the sink. She was already dressed in a pair of black slacks and a sharp blazer we'd found in the clearance rack. With her hair pulled back in a tight bun and her tattoos covered, she didn't look like a mechanic. She looked like a paralegal who knew where the bodies were buried. I adjusted the collar of my own white button-down. It was stiff, scratchy polyester, but it looked professional. I threw a black blazer over it. I don't look intense, Riley. I look like an audit, and nobody likes an audit. I washed the dye from my hands, scrubbing until my skin was raw. Let's go. We have a car to catch. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city scrubbed clean and glistening. We took the Odyssey back to Big Mike's lot. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the industrial skyline, hitting the puddles and turning them into gold. Mike was waiting by the crusher shed. He'd pulled the Chevelle out. He'd even wiped it down. The black paint shone like a weapon. The chrome bumpers gleamed. It looked angry. She's ready to run, Mike said, tossing the keys to Riley. He looked at us, 2 women in cheap suits standing next to a muscle car. He cracked a grin. You two look like the men in black, if the men in black bought their clothes at a discount bin. We're on a budget, Mike, I said, opening the passenger door. We'll pay you back for the minivan rental when this is over. Keep it or crush it. I don't care. Mike spat. "Just make sure David knows who sent you." Riley slid into the driver's seat. She adjusted the mirror, her eyes hard. She turned the key. The 454 big block engine roared to life, a deep, earth-shaking thrum that vibrated right through the soles of my cheap loafers. It was a heartbeat, strong, unbroken. "We've got the dossier?" I asked, patting the thick folder on my lap. "Check," Riley said. "We've got the medical log?" "Check." "Then let's go crash a party." The drive downtown was different this time. We weren't running away. We were hunting. Riley drove with precision, weaving through the morning rush hour traffic. The Chevelle turned heads. People stared. Businessmen in their Lexuses, moms in their SUVs. They saw an old-school muscle car cutting through the sea of plastic hybrids. They didn't know the engine block was hiding a grandmother who was about to commit corporate homicide. Apex Tower rose up in the center of the financial district, a glass and steel needle sticking out of the concrete. It was cold, sterile, and intimidating. David loved this building. He loved the exclusivity of it. He thought the hike made him untouchable. He was wrong. Elevation just means you have further to fall. We pulled up to the valet stand. The valet, a young kid in a red vest, looked at the Chevelle like a spaceship had just landed. Ma'am, this is a loading zone for executive arrivals only," he stammered as Riley killed the engine. I stepped out, smoothing my blazer. I put on a pair of reading glasses I didn't need, just for the effect. "We are executives, son. Keep it close. We won't be long." I threw him a $20 bill. He caught it, confused, and backed away. We marched through the revolving doors. The lobby was a cavern of marble and echoing footsteps. The security desk was a fortress manned by 2 guards in blazers that fit better than ours. This was the choke point. David would have alerted them. Silver alert, confused elderly female. "Shoulders back," I whispered to Riley. "Walk like you own the concrete." We approached the desk. The lead guard, a beefy guy with a headset, looked up. His eyes narrowed slightly as he scanned my face. I saw the recognition flicker. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to call for backup. I slammed the folder down on the marble counter before he could get a word out. The thwack echoed like a gunshot. "State Board of Financial Ethics. We're here for the closing on the Higgins transaction, 12th floor. And we are already 10 minutes late because your valet was incompetent. If we miss the notary window, I am citing this building for obstruction of a federal audit." The guard blinked. He looked at the folder. It had a generic, confidential sticker Arthur had printed on it. He looked at Riley, who was tapping her watch impatiently, looking every bit the annoyed assistant. "I don't have you on the list, ma'am," he stammered. "And there's a flag on a... Do you want to explain to the state attorney general why you delayed an active fraud investigation?" I leaned in, lowering my glasses. "Call upstairs. Call David Higgins. Tell him the auditors are here to verify the escrow funds. Go ahead. I'll wait. But while you're dialing, I'm logging your badge number." It was a bluff, a massive, teetering bluff. If he called David, we were done. David would know instantly. But security guards are trained to handle physical threats, not bureaucratic nightmares. They feel lawsuits more than guns. The guard hesitated. He looked at his partner. He looked at the line of people forming behind us. "12th floor," he grunted, sliding 2 visitor badges across the counter. "Conference room B." "Thank you," I said, snatching the badges. "Riley, note the time of entry." "Noted." Riley clicked a pen. We walked to the elevators, not rushing. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I thought the buttons on my shirt would pop. The doors shut, sealing us in the quiet steel box. "I can't believe that worked," Riley exhaled, her knees shaking slightly. "People see what they expect to see," I said, watching the numbers climb. I expected a confused grandma. I gave her a nightmare bureaucrat. Ding. Floor 12. The doors opened. The hallway was plush, carpeted in gray with modern art on the walls that looked like paint spills. It was quiet. Too quiet. We walked down the corridor towards conference room B. The door was heavy frosted glass. I could hear voices inside. I held up a hand. Riley stopped. Generous offer considering the market volatility, a smooth voice was saying. That was the developer. It's a fair price, and as the sole executor with power of attorney pending, I can assure you the title transfer will be seamless. My mother, well, she's in a facility now. She's not lucid enough to sign, but the medical directives are clear. I felt the heat rise in my neck, not the hot flash of age, but the white-hot burn of betrayal. Not lucid. Facility. And the environmental impact report? Another voice asked. Clean. David lied. The shop has been green for decades. No remediation needed. That was a lie. We used heavy solvents in the 80s. The ground needed testing. He was setting them up for a lawsuit later just to get his cash now. Okay, the developer said. Let's sign. I have the wire transfer ready to initiate. Now, I whispered to Riley. I didn't knock. I didn't ask permission. I grabbed the brushed steel handle and shoved the door open with all the strength 40 years of wrench turning had given me. The door swung wide, banging against the stopper. The room froze. 5 men in expensive suits sat around a long mahogany table. David was at the head, a gold pen in his hand, hovering over a stack of documents. He looked up, his smile dropped, his face went the color of curdled milk. Sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice steady and cold. I walked into the room, Riley flanking me like a bodyguard. Gentlemen, I addressed the strangers, my name is Martha Higgins. I am the sole owner of Higgins Customs, and contrary to what my son has told you, I'm not in a facility. I'm right here, and this shop is not for sale. David, what is this? The lead developer asked, looking from me to him. You said she was incapacitated. You produced a doctor's note. David's eyes darted around the room. He was trapped. Panic flickered behind his eyes. He tried to regain control. He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Gentlemen, please, David said, moving around the table toward me. His hands were up in a placating gesture, but his eyes were threatening. My mother is having an episode. She wanders. She gets confused about who she is. This is exactly why we need to finalize this today, to pay for her care. He reached for my arm. Come on, Mom. Let's go get you some water. You're making a scene. I didn't flinch. I waited until his hand was inches from my sleeve. Don't touch me, David, I said. Mom, stop it. You're sick, he hissed, grabbing my elbow hard. Security is on the way. Riley, I said calmly. Riley stepped forward. She didn't punch him. She didn't shove him. She simply placed the laptop on the mahogany table and hit the spacebar. The big screen on the wall, which had been displaying the architectural renderings of the condos, flickered. Then a video popped up. It was grainy, taken from a hidden angle, a recording Riley had pulled from the cloud backup of David's own home security system, the one loop he forgot to delete. It showed David in his kitchen talking on speakerphone. Listen, Marcus, the old lady is losing it. I upped the dosage. By Friday, she won't know her own name. I'll get the signature, sell the land, and wash your cash through the escrow. Just give me 2 more days. The audio was crisp. The words hung in the air-conditioned room like toxic gas. Upped the dosage. Wash your cash.
The ringtone was a generic chirping sound, the kind you hear in grocery stores and movie theaters. But in that silent, air-conditioned conference room, it sounded like a fire alarm. David's eyes darted from me to the phone vibrating on the mahogany table. The screen lit up with a single name, Marcus. The gun in his hand wavered. The muzzle dipped just an inch. That was all the opening a mother needed. I didn't lunge. I didn't scream. I just walked forward, calm as a Sunday morning, and slapped him. It wasn't a closed fist punch like I'd use on a stuck bolt. It was an open-handed, stinging slap across the cheek, the kind of discipline he hadn't felt since he was 10 years old and stole a candy bar from the corner store. Smack. The sound cracked through the room. David was so shocked he didn't even react to the pain.
He blinked, his mouth falling open. The gun hung loosely in his fingers. "Give me the piece, David," I said, my voice low and hard, "before you hurt yourself." He looked at me, his eyes welling with tears of panic and humiliation. He was 45 years old, wearing a $3,000 suit, holding a deadly weapon, and he looked exactly like a toddler who'd broken a vase. The facade of the powerful executive had crumbled, leaving only the scared, greedy boy underneath. He dropped the revolver. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. Riley kicked it away instantly, sliding it under the heavy conference table. She moved in, grabbing David's arm and twisting it behind his back, forcing him down into the leather chair. "Don't move," she hissed. "Security's already in the elevator. I heard the ding." The developers were slowly crawling out from under the table, looking pale and shaken. The lead guy, the one who almost signed the check, looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. "Mrs. Higgins," he stammered, straightening his tie. We had no idea." "You didn't look. You saw a cheap price and a confused old woman, and you didn't ask questions. That's on you. Now, get out, before the cops ask why you were doing business with a money launderer." They didn't need telling twice. They grabbed their briefcases and scrambled out the door just as the elevator pinged again, and 4 uniformed officers burst into the hallway, guns drawn. "Drop it! Hands in the air!" Riley released David and stepped back, raising her hands. I did the same. "It's okay, officers," I called out. "The situation is contained. The weapon is under the table." They swarmed the room. David didn't resist as they cuffed him. He just slumped in the chair, sobbing. He looked at me as they hauled him up. Mom, you can't let me take me. Vane, if I go to jail, Vane's guys are inside. They'll kill me. You have to bail me out, please." I watched them read him his rights. I watched the son I had nursed through fevers, the son I had put through college, the son who had tried to turn my brain into mush for a payout. "I can't help you, David," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just a confused old lady, remember? I wouldn't know how to post bail." They dragged him out. The last thing I heard was his desperate wailing echoing down the corridor. 3 months later. The smell of the shop was back to normal. Oil, coffee, and the metallic tang of grinding steel. The for sale sign that David had secretly commissioned was long gone, cut into pieces and used as scrap metal for welding practice. I sat in the office, the real office, with the door open. The sun was streaming in, highlighting the dust motes. I took a sip of my coffee, black, no sugar, and looked at the new sign Riley had just hung on the back wall. Higgins and Granddaughter Customs, Est, 1978. It looked good. Riley slid out from under a '67 Mustang, wiping grease from her cheek. She walked into the office, grabbing a bottle of water. "Hey, Graham, the lawyer called," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "The plea deal is finalized." "And?" He said, 5 years for the fraud, another 3 for the elder abuse charges, to run consecutively. He's going to state. I nodded slowly. 8 years. It was a lifetime, and it was a blink of an eye. And the shop? Totally clear. The forensic audit proved the money laundering was all on his side. The business is clean. We're in the black, Graham, especially with the backlog of work we have now that people know the Silver Justice Lady is back in business. The channel had blown up. Riley had filmed the whole recovery process, not the crime stuff, but the restoration of the cars, with me narrating. We had 1 million subscribers. People love seeing an old woman tearing down a transmission. It turns out, competence is a universal language. "There's one more thing," Riley said, hesitating. "David put in a visitation request. For you." I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today is Tuesday. I usually go to the grocery store on Tuesdays. "Graham, He's in solitary because of the threat from Vane's crew. He's safe for now, but he's begging to see you. He says it's urgent." I thought about it. I thought about the needle in my arm. I thought about the nights I spent wondering if I was losing my mind. "All right," I said, standing up and grabbing my keys. "Let's go see what he wants." The prison was a gray, soulless place, smelling of bleach and misery. I sat on the metal stool on one side of the thick plexiglass. Riley waited in the car. She said she had nothing to say to him. David was brought in. He looked terrible. He lost 30 pounds. His hair was shaved and his eyes were sunken, darting around nervously. He sat down, picking up the receiver. I picked up mine. "Mom," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Thank God you came." "Hello, David." "Mom, you have to get me out of here, or at least I need money for the commissary, for protection. Vane's reach is long. I need to pay people off to stay alive in here." He looked at me with those same manipulative eyes, thinking he could still play the strings, thinking because he was my mother I would always break. "I need $5,000 a month, Mom. That's all. The shop pulls that in a week, right? Just deposit it in my account. Please, they're gonna hurt me." I reached into my purse. David's eyes lit up with hope. He thought I was reaching for a checkbook. Instead, I pulled out a folded piece of paper and pressed it against the glass. It was a copy of the fake financial report he had created 3 months ago, the one he had shown the bank to prove the shop was worthless. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "You remember this, don't you? This is the profit and loss statement you created. Look at the bottom line, David." He squinted. It says the shop is operating at a loss." "Exactly," I smiled. "According to your expert financial analysis, the shop is failing. It's bleeding money. It's worthless." But that was fake. That was just for the bank. We know the shop makes money." "Do we?" I feigned surprise. "David, you spent 6 months convincing everyone, including me, that I was senile and the business was dead. You did such a good job that I'm afraid I have to believe you." "Mom, stop it. This isn't funny. I need the cash." "I can't give you what I don't have, son," I said, folding the paper back up. "I'm on a fixed income, and the shop, well, as you said, it's a burden. I'm just an old lady trying to keep the lights on." "You have the millions from the backlog. I saw the YouTube channel. You're making a fortune." "That money?" I leaned in closer to the glass. "That's Riley's money. She's the owner now. I transferred the deed yesterday. And you know how it is. Young people these days, they hold grudges." David's face went white. The hope drained out of him, replaced with a cold, dawning horror. He realized, finally, that the game was over. He wasn't the player anymore. He was the pawn. "You can't leave me here with nothing," he whispered. "They'll kill me." "You're a smart boy, David," I said, standing up. "You're an engineer. You build things with your mind, remember? I'm sure you'll figure out a way to survive. Maybe you can fix the warden's washing machine." I hung up the phone. He started screaming, slamming his fist against the glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear but could easily guess. The guard stepped in, pulling him back. I didn't look back. I walked out of the visitation room, through the heavy steel doors, and out into the bright, blinding sunshine. Riley was waiting, leaning against the fender of the Chevelle. She looked at my face. "How'd it go?" she asked. "He's exactly where he belongs," I said, climbing into the passenger seat. "Did you give him the money?" I gave him exactly what he gave me, nothing but a reality check. Riley smiled, revving the engine. "Where to, boss?" "Back to the shop," I said, watching the prison disappear in the rearview mirror. "We've got a '69 Camaro in Bay 3 that isn't gonna fix itself."